GM, everybody. Welcome to the first Pinto Town Hall of 2026. That means that we have entered a new calendar year. Pinto is, I think, making a reasonable case as low volatility money, although we are here in the 30s, not in the 90s or around $1. So there's obviously still a lot of room for improvement. We are here as a group to talk about the problems the model is currently experiencing and how we can improve it. It's great to be here with the low volatility money crew, if you will. So the way we typically run these town halls is we go around hearing from contributors what they're working on and anything on their mind they want to share or get off their chest. And then we typically open up the floor for discussions, questions, FUD, etc. So let's kick this show off. Frio, how are you, sir?
Doing well. Admittedly, this week was a light week due to the holidays, but at a high level, we are focusing on a lot of things. The latest thing that we're trying to push out is the with Steve engage point migration, as well as the power referral system. I think I said a couple of days ago internally that I need to revise the timeline there. Other than that, to finish that thought, hopefully we'll get that done within within this month, early this month. So that's my plan on that. Other than that, we're doing a lot of administrative efforts to round off the year, just to keep ourselves on a clean slate, and set ourselves for success for 2026. Other than that, we're also working on the Beanstalk shipments, of course, making more progress on that front. And lastly, onboarding some of the contributors to some of our bug bounty programs, as well as Hypernative. We've just renewed our service with there, and given Hypernative is a very important part of our security stack, I think it's important as more contributors understand how Hypernative works and how we can improve that system as well.
Awesome. And maybe could you just give a little more clarity on the timeline for this next upgrade? It wasn't exactly clear based on what you said.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at it again. I just need to clean up some things in terms of testing, and then I needed to create a script that will instantiate the pod referral system. So, the current code has all the necessary components to start the referral system from this block, but obviously, ideally, all the people that have zoned that should be eligible for the pod referrals should be also instantiated. So made it need to implement that. And in addition, I think there was a change that was requested a couple weeks ago regarding adding a cap in which the system can mint that many pods or that many Pintos before it shuts itself off. So I need to add that as well. So those are like the two large key items before we deploy. But my estimated timeline is mid-January on this end. Oh, you're muted, Ben, if you're speaking.
Sorry. I said thank you very much, Frio. It's a good update, and looking forward to this next upgrade going out. I don't know how this pod referral is going to work. It's unclear if it'll have a material effect on sewing, but I think it's interesting to test it out. All right. Why don't we swing it over to X-Typin? What's up?
GM, doing well, Ben.
GM, talk to us.
As Fiho mentioned, we have a Beanstalk shipment, and my last weeks, I was focused fully about that, and I was trying to understand how this shipment implemented, and if there is any bug or should be any structure that should be improved. I was fully dive into that, and also working on some bug reports, checking of them, creating POCs about that. Our reports really are that's really exploiting some bugs, and trying to creating trying to implementing to how to fix them. Yeah, that's all from my side.
Nice. Nice stuff. Welcome to 2026, X Typin. Good to have you here.
Yeah.
All right. Pinto Pirate. Ahoy.
Ahoy. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
On this end, for this week, I finished up and deployed a new system that will selectively cache some of the subgraph responses. I think I talked about this briefly at the previous town hall. This will like really speed up the charts on the UI, which retrieve, many data points over the course of, coming up on almost 10,000 seasons now. So yeah, that's done. I don't know if it's actually been like integrated into the UI yet. So if not, I expect that will happen soon. But that's pretty exciting because I know some of those charts were getting really slow and just kind of made it difficult and annoying to actually look at a lot of that data on the site. So I'm excited to see that in action. But yeah, beyond that, the next thing I'm going to be working on is we actually are the site we have for the Pinto exchange is actually still not open sourced, and so that's something that I'm gonna make sure we get taken care of. That'll be open source, and then because eventually what we want to do is these sites are hosted with Netlify, and we want to get on like the special like open source developer plan with them, and that's kind of like what's blocking us from doing that because one of the sites is it's not open source yet. So yeah, that's kind of what my week ahead is going to be looking like.
Nice. That sounds cool. Thank you very much, Pinto Pirate. Happy New Year. All right. Why don't we kick it over to Fayaz? What's up, Fayaz? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Doing good. Last week, so before page
Hey, Fayaz, it's a bit hard to hear you. I think you brought
can
your
you hear me now
2025.
better?
Yeah, try again.
Yeah. Actually, last week, I just worked on QA feedbacks and also made an improvement about CI/CD flow. I will be working on Pinto Pirate's cache system this week, I guess. I will implement that through front end. Thank
I don't
you.
know if we can. Okay, great. Thank you, Fayaz. All right. I think maybe for 2026 we gotta find a way to get Fayaz a new microphone. But that's a good problem to have. All right. Pinticito, what's up?
Ciao, ciao. Happy New Year, guys.
Happy New Year.
Doing well over here. Yeah, it's been quiet on the farm. For me this week, my attention has largely been on Nebula and relaxing a bit over the last week for the holiday. But we did have to deal with some bug bounty related things in terms of our program and in terms of responding to a bug report. And otherwise, social communication has proceeded as regular, have plans to increase the scope of that in the new year. So looking forward to doing so. And very excited for what I think will be an exciting year for the program. I think that hopefully a year from now, we'll have a lot more people talking about what we've done.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Pinto. On my end, have spent quite a lot of time thinking about, what I've started to call Beanstalk 5, if you will, which is this next full iteration of the model and where to really take things from here. Which is, as I've sort of been alluding to, something that I hope maybe in a couple months after we've completed the current work slate, which we've got at least the next quarter or so slated out of work, that we're going to have an opportunity to really zoom out and figure out where to take this thing next. And it's been quite a meaningful and exciting work. So that's taken up a good deal of my time. And then I've been thinking a bit about how we can best share what we're doing with more people. One of the things that's come up is, and this is something that I want to open up the floor to the people here. Maybe we should be having some or all of these town halls on Twitter instead as a space, with the idea being that generally there's a very high friction to people joining the Discord. And perhaps if we make it a little bit lower friction for people to pop in and just listen to what we're sort of talking about, that has the potential to bring in new people. And relatedly, I think if we're going to do an X Spaces, I think the format probably should change a bit, which is to say that like these updates from contributors are, I think, more relevant for the people that are tracking, that come every week, which there's not that many people, but like who's working on what doesn't feel the most appropriate for a Twitter space, whereas higher level discussion and debate about the project and about the problems and about the improvements, even if that can get a little bit more technical, that feels more appropriate for X. So yeah, I'm curious in hearing some feedback from this crew on whether or not there's interest, whether people think that maybe that we should try out something like an X space. With what regularity should we doing it on X? Should we move the town hall over there? Should we have like a special, a different thing other than town hall? We sort of already use most of the town hall for these types of more general discussions, so I don't necessarily think it's the best idea to double dip, but wanted to open up the floor and see if people had thoughts on that.
So it seems like you're suggesting to do a brief roundtable update session in Discord, and then at a regular or semi-regular rest of town hall type discussion in X.
Or we can make like when we do the updates, when we do the event on X, if we keep it as one event, maybe the contributors can just post an asynchronous update, typing out a couple sentences instead. Like there are a couple different ways we can skin this cat. But the core idea is that we should be moving the meatier parts of our discussion into a more public forum that's lower friction to access. And it's like when we go live everyone will get notifications when people join, and I think it has the potential to just attract more awareness to what we're doing. So the real idea is let's move our discussion onto X with what cadence is an open question, and then how to sort of adjust the updating and the other stuff around this is an open question as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth trying to see if it's better or worse. I think it's nice to see some of the regulars who pop in, but I do think there's a feeling of like people don't really want to hear the updates as much as they want to participate in the discussion. I could be wrong, but it seems like people come in more a little later into the town hall. And I know that perspective has been expressed by people like Ford. Um, so I'm interested in seeing if it increases turnout, and I would just want to check about our capacity to record it in X and also notify people. Because now we're kind of switching it, like we would be announcing it in Discord, and people would have to go to X. But that's probably less friction than the other way around.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna be too difficult. Like I'm sure once we start the spaces, we can get a link we can post. And if we start the spaces from the main Pinto account, or we start it from like my account, for example, I'm sure people will get notified as appropriate separately.
Yeah, I assume that those logistical things could be worked out. I'm trying to think why we made the decision originally to stop doing stuff on X. I don't know if people remember.
I don't recall.
I think it's a good idea to try hosting it there and just see if more people join. Because when a live meeting is going on, then it shows it to you on top within the iOS app, so people are more likely to join.
Yeah, and then I guess
Cool.
it's just like, what do we want the content of that to be? Do we just want to go straight into roundtable, or do we want to, or rather, straight into discussion, or do we want to maintain the around the horn style? If we didn't, yeah, we would need to find another way to update people on progress.
I think either way would be nice to get a summary of contributions from each contributor posted somewhere in Discord. That way they can just be read through really quickly without having to listen to the full call.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's right.
Yeah, these it is a bit like tedious, I feel like is the right word. Maybe cumbersome. Where it's like you got to listen for 12 or 15 minutes to get what you could read maybe in like 3 minutes or something, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, we would just. Yeah, I mean, I'm questioning if it's important to hear from every contributor, or if like Freeho could just assemble a few bullets of the things that are being worked on, and then if people want the contributor, by contributor breakdown, then they would come listen or whatever.
So what one
I
thing that I've
mean, sorry,
heard.
just like at a higher
Go
level,
ahead.
like what is the information that people want if they're gonna come and just read like a brief update? I think they just want to see progress happening across all the fronts. I don't think they actually care like who's doing what necessarily.
I think it's still nice to have like from each contributor a short update, maybe like 3 to 4 bullets. Or more or less.
Yeah, I think it's nice. I'm just thinking about, everybody having to submit their bullets and then compiling them, but I don't think it's so cumbersome. I'm just questioning what's actually valuable, but I think either is fine. It's definitely good to like know how many people are working and to know that things are getting done generally.
So my next question is around the cadence here. Like, I'm concerned that doing it on Twitter weekly might be a little too much for Twitter versus like bi-weekly might be more appropriate. Uh, I'm just like cautious about spamming people's feeds every week. Curious if people think it's okay to do it weekly versus we should try to do it every other week. You know, maybe alternate between Discord and X or something. I don't know. Maybe that can be a good way to get people to sign up for Discord as well, like every other week.
Yeah, I think that's good. Maybe even monthly. Like we shouldn't make any drastic change necessarily, right?
I think it'd be better
I don't know.
to shot weekly on X because you get a lot more visibility there. Here, like stuff is happening, but you only see it if you're in the Discord, so it kind of looks like the project is less active. But if you see weekly stuff happening on X, then that is a better sign of liveliness.
You think weekly on X makes sense?
Yeah, like now we do it weekly on Discord, just move it weekly to X.
You're not concerned about like fatigue either by X, the algo, or by the people on X?
No.
Cool. I mean, I don't think switching where we host it is that drastic, and we can always decide like this isn't working and we switch back, or we want to start to alternate. But I'm happy to try out X on a weekly basis and see what happens.
Sure. Let me just check on
And
the logistics. But we should probably be able to do that next
sure
week.
it's recordable. Gotta be. And yeah, I guess the difference would be that let's not do the updates as we've been doing them, and let's try to do them async where they can get posted in the Discord, like maybe at the start of the town hall or something like that.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if somebody who's usually not coming to the town halls or maybe even not in the Discord pops into an X-based town hall, wouldn't they want to know that there's progress happening? Versus if we just jump into discussion about how the protocol's struggling, that's kind of a bear signal, though.
A good point.
For now, maybe we just keep the same format, switch to X, and add an async update in Discord.
Sounds good.
Yeah, maybe we can ask the people on X that joined for some feedback after a couple of them.
Sure.
Cool. All right, so let's plan for next week. We will host the first Pinto Town Hall on X. Cool. I hope yeah, I hope it's a way to spread the word a little bit. So sounds pretty cool. All right. So why don't we continue with our normally scheduled programming, which is to open up the floor and we can talk about whatever. So we can talk about whatever questions people have, whatever problems people have. We can talk about where to take this thing. The floor is open. Ford, I believe you may have some topics on your mind, as you typically do, but not to prompt you per se, but floor is open.
Awesome. Well, maybe to throw it back at you, you said you're thinking about, version 5. What does that look like?
Well, we've been talking about it, I think, a fair bit here. Although I believe that the last recording got nixed or something. I think I heard that the last town hall that we had, which was a couple weeks ago, because I think we took off last week for Christmas, didn't get downloaded in time, and so it got deleted. So people may not be up to speed with the latest, which is honestly a bit frustrating. But you know, the way I'm thinking about it, there's really two levels to what's next. The first level is let's call it raw mechanism improvement. And then the second level is what you might call utility improvement, where the first level really has to do with management of this liquidity and auto converts. And this is something that I think, Ford, you and I have talked about quite extensively in this town hall at this point, with respect to when to convert, how much to convert, how to minimize the gamification or extraction of value as a result of that, and so on and so forth. And we've talked about how potentially introducing some sort of auto or group convert further improves the efficacy of the existing convert bonus and penalty system. So I think that's an open question. Like, part of me thinks that the direction to take this is to play harder into the low volatility money thesis or narrative, and like ditch the dollar peg altogether. And in that way, to basically, instead of having the system auto convert towards some fixed target, which it still could do, they're not necessarily related discussions on the model, although they are, of course, related. But instead of having the system auto convert, you could have the peg adjust as some historical average of the price. And this is sort of like the rye model from back in the day. And it's that's sort of the other way to slice this, if you will. Like, the nuance is to convert, like where the system is right now. We don't really have inflows or outflows. System's pretty low volatility in the mid 30s, let's call it mid to low 30s now. And to convert really would mean to increase the price at which people can sell their current Pinto holdings. Whereas if the peg or the target adjusts over time, let's say that the peg adjusts downward, we've been sufficiently stable in the 30s such that the peg comes down and matches the current price. Well, then what's going to happen is the protocol is going to start to print, which I know Ford gets you excited. And just busting your balls. But the point is, in either case, whether it's through adjusting the liquidity pool such that the ratio in the pool is changed such that people with the same amount of Pinto can sell their Pinto for more, or the protocol issues more Pinto such that people have more Pinto to sell at the same price, such that they effectively have more. I think in practice they're the same, or very, very similar, where the amount of sell pressure or value that can be taken out of the protocol increases at some point. And there's really no way. Well, this is the thing. So as we start to think about other things that you can put into the system, like the next, like another topic is delaying issuance of mints. Like one of the big problems that Pinto has experienced, and Beanstalk before it, is that almost all of the demand is speculative, and particularly speculative for typically short-term yield, where when the system is growing, demand comes in, and when it's not growing, people leave and don't come back or don't stick around. And obviously, the stock system has demonstrated some efficacy at getting some people to stick around, which is great. But there's a question as to how can we further reduce speculative demand. And one way to do that is to delay the distribution of mints. Now, this is something that I've typically pushed back on historically, which is to say that if the protocol has excess demand such that printing makes sense, that from a purely efficient market perspective, the protocol should try to issue that inflation as quickly as possible such that it can hit the market and the market can readjust its price. And that argument still remains true. But one thing that I'm thinking about, talking with Brendan quite a bit about, maybe quite a bit is a bit strong, but have been talking with Brendan a bit about is the idea of delaying the issuance such that some Pinto gets minted, and it may even get distributed. It may get distributed such that it can be converted. But if you want to withdraw the value, that value may be haircut if you withdraw it immediately, or forfeited altogether. Where if you withdraw before some period of time, that you may forfeit the yield. Now, this I think, personally, I still don't think this is the best idea, because I think that once you introduce this supply overhang, it introduces some weird dynamics into the market, which may have some unforeseen consequences, like the deposits that have the yield on them effectively now are like some sort of fixed income product. And so you wouldn't really expect people to withdraw those. You'd expect them to be sold on the secondary market. And particularly in the case where like demand dries up or excess demand dries up, now the question is, well, are you let's say the price was above the value target, there's some minting occurring, but the distribution of the minting is delayed. Now the price comes back down. Is the minting still supposed to happen, or excuse me, is the distribution still supposed to happen or not? Should you just cancel the mint and sort of erase the yield? And if you're going to erase the yield, well, then it's like you never minted it in the first place. And then really what you're doing is really just delaying the mints in practice. So then what's happening is instead of printing whatever the amount that you're supposed to print is, now you're just printing less in the hopes that that limits inflation. So there is some nuance here in terms of like, well, if you delay the distribution of the mints, still isn't that better? Yes, but you can see how logically this isn't the most coherent policy to put in place. So I can't say I'm a big advocate for it. But the reason I went down this digression is in the context of what should be on the table for Beanstalk 5. It really should be, at least with respect to the volatility, it's a question of how can we minimize the volatility with respect to the value target further. And I think it's either going to be some sort of convert system or a dynamic peg, or both potentially. And then trying to figure out what are the other bells and whistles. Maybe it's a delayed distribution of mints, although I probably wouldn't be an advocate for it. Maybe it's something else. there's a couple other ideas that have been thrown around as well. So that's on the what I would call the level one. And obviously, there's a lot more to be said about this. But on the level one, just trying to figure out how to maximize or minimize volatility with respect to the value target, and thereby create some utility. Now,
Can we pause there for a second and dig in further, or did you want to move on to other stuff?
No, please go ahead.
So 2 main points, right? The first point, you can either make it not pegged to $1, and point two, you can distribute the yield like later. Those are the two big ideas, right?
Well, I'd say the first idea is either this dynamic peg or the group convert. Like those are two halves of the same coin in a sense.
I see. Yeah, personally, I'm not a fan of the dynamic peg because that makes it feel like then it's just any other token that's like printing a little bit and going down, and it prints a little bit more and goes back up. Like it's not really, like everything is low volatility at that point. So I don't think that it's really that appealing.
Is it?
You could say like the Curve token is low volatility, right? Like Curve gives you some of their fees. The token's not very volatile. If you look at the chart, it behaves more like a stock because basically you're buying into this thing. You're getting like a percentage of the earnings. Like this is the same way that stocks work, basically. If you are looking for a stable store of value that's
how stocks work? I don't understand.
Like you buy a stock with some expectation that either the value of the underlying stock is going to go up or you're going to get some dividend, and like that's how stocks work, right?
Yeah, but that's a little bit like a simplistic take, right? It has to do with the source of the value that you're holding, right? Like a stock has
I mean,
underlying business where there's revenue that like the company is trying to attract the revenue through selling some product, and then they pass on the profits from that revenue to the holders of the equity. Like that's sort of a fundamentally different value proposition than this token just has some game built into it that is designed to minimize its volatility, which therefore should create some utility as a money, right? Like those are pretty different value propositions, I would say.
I don't know. I feel like it ends up being pretty similar in the end because you're basically betting on how many people are going to buy pods and how many pods they buy, in the same way that you're betting on how many people are going to buy the stock in the future. Like, sure, the stock depends more on the actual underlying business. Pinto doesn't actually have any underlying business besides selling pods, right? Like that is the business of Pinto. So in some ways, it's similar. But anyway, I don't think that point is like too important to dig into. It just feels like if you have a very dynamic peg, then like you don't have any expectation that this thing is going to be worth approximately $1 in the future. You have no idea. Like, at least when you have this idea that, all right, we're going to try to hover around $1, then you have some gauge of like, oh, it's trading at $1.10. It's a little bit overpriced. If it's trading at 90 cents, it's a little bit underpriced. That just makes a lot more sense to me, like as an average Joe.
You're saying as a participant, it's easier to know how to like play the game.
Yeah, and as someone who, is interested in looking for some other store of value that's reasonably stable but still kind of tracks the dollar, but that does not depend on like having actual dollars in a bank, and also that is not the CDP model, that this would be the only alternative. So to get rid of that peg, now it's something more like Rye, like you mentioned. I haven't looked at Rye in a while, but last I looked, I think it was not really doing that well. So I don't think that this system should try to replicate that model. I think it's got its own really cool thing with the debt issuance, and it should stick with trying to maintain like some kind of actual peg. But I think it would make more sense to allow the peg to fluctuate more on the upside. So, we're like, great, we're sitting here at 30 cents. We're reasonably happy. I'm not that happy, but some people would say that they're happy, at 30 cents because it's low volatility. I would be just as happy if it was at $1.30 and like slowly minting and slowly bringing the price down rather than, at 30 cents trying to slowly bring the price back up. I'm I know that you've mentioned before, like, well, shoot, the risk is if people see that, it's over peg and we're not minting enough to bring it back to peg, then that will just keep the mints continuing to increase and more people will keep joining and joining and joining. And it's like, wait a second, this is the actual idea of the project. Like, this project requires that over a long period of time, more and more people will put more and more value into this project. So I think, even something simple like just mint, a fraction of the mints necessary, and you can increase this fraction over time. So if you're a little bit over peg, you can mint, like 10% of what it takes to get back. If you're really over peg, you can, increase this percentage. You can throw a gauge on it. We've got this beautiful gauge system that you can throw any type of parameters in it you want to, and it can adjust accordingly. That's one thing. What do you think about that? Maybe we can chew on that a little bit, and then I have some other comments beyond that.
Well, my first reaction is with respect to the dynamic peg. I think the reason to harp on the difference between utility as money versus utility as a stock has to do more with the level 2 discussion around utility. Because I think the line starts to get blurred further and further, and therefore I think it's quite important for us to have a clear mental model for the difference. But maybe that's a topic for next week or something on X. With respect to the dynamic peg, my thought is that we like they're sort of doing the same things, and from that perspective, from like a raw scientific angle, it's probably better to try the next model with a hard peg. I think the better argument that, and it is a good argument, that it might be confusing for people or hard to understand what's going on, although I think there's a counter argument there. I think that the better argument is that from a raw data collection perspective, it's going to be easier to understand what's working and what's not working with a fixed peg. Whereas once you have a dynamic peg, I think it might be a little bit harder to do raw analysis. If that makes sense. So that's probably the better, like that would be the argument for me why not to do it yet. But I would still think that, let's say that we implement this dynamic convert system and it works. Like that, the system just maintains low volatility around the value target. Then I don't know if it would make sense to drop the dynamic value target. So it's given the way that we've been experimenting thus far, it probably makes the most sense to start with that again. To start with that and
Wait,
to focus on.
Just to clarify, are you suggesting a fork?
No, I'm suggesting that we don't start with a dynamic peg, like that the next upgrade. I'm talking about in the context of Beanstalk 5, should we prioritize the monetary policy around auto group converts versus a dynamic peg? And I'm suggesting that
Got it.
the model is probably better off from a scientific perspective to have an auto group convert system as opposed to a dynamic peg due to the nature of the data collection. This has nothing to do with the fork system or anything thereof.
Cool. You mentioned one thing, which was this like vesting of the rewards when over peg. I pinged Brendan and he actually replied to a couple of my messages, and it was kind of like he had this idea of basically, as the system is, quote unquote printing, it's swapping these print rewards into a non-Pinto asset. So I would imagine something like everything that's whitelisted, it could, almost like a mini flood where it just like swaps a little bit of them automatically into the non-Pinto asset. And then when it actually distributes them, it distributes this non-Pinto asset as opposed to the Pinto asset. And then with some kind of, vested rewards, that sounds like an appealing idea for me to try, although you did kind of pretty clearly enunciate why this is not a great idea, because, you end up with this like overhang of supply. But if you distribute these rewards as non-Pinto, and then the price goes back under peg or under target, now people have something actually to buy back in when it goes back under target again. So I think that might be kind of an interesting idea worth discussing a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, the flood just has some, like, because what this idea is sort of is like a continuous flood, or maybe like a micro flood. We can call it whatever we want, but the idea is that instead of in response to excess, like, what does it mean for the price to be too high in practice? It means that the ratio of Pinto to non-Pinto in the liquidity pools is such that there's too much non-Pinto, right? So, like the flood, what it does is it mints Pinto, and then it swaps that Pinto for non-Pinto and removes the non-Pinto from the pool, thereby returning the price to its value target. And now the system holds non-Pinto, and typically what it does is it distributes that non-Pinto to holders before the flood started, right, to try to avoid the gamification or extraction of value from the flood. And so only the holders that were in before the flood started, technically before the rain started, get the flood. Now, on the one hand, like this type of thing would definitely minimize, assuming we implemented it properly, it would almost certainly minimize the speculative nature of things in a sense, because by like the flood, what it's designed to do is in the moment where the system is likely to have excess speculative demand because it's got low debt and a high price, that is the exact moment that it's supposed to basically stop, like flood the system to stop it in its tracks, to kill its momentum. And if the problem that we identify is one where fundamentally the system has too much momentum at periods of times, having some sort of micro flood could be an interesting remedy to that. And so I think to me this has to do with sort of your view on what actually transpired with Pinto, right? Like we have some really interesting data from Pinto's early days where the system grew to on the order of $30 million in value or something thereof in the system. It might have even been close to 40. I don't remember the specifics when it comes to some, like, totaling the Pinto supply with the liquidity. I think it's closer to 30. And so it's like, was that an instance of the system just growing too quickly? And then it's like, well, we already had a flood in place. Like, that was the time when the system was flooding. So it's unclear if just implementing a micro flood is really going to be enough in those instances. Like, to me, what we had happen was a period of significant speculative demand. The system's aggressive, speculation minimization mechanism still wasn't really enough. And so, like, in my mind, a micro flood doesn't really like if you identify what happened as the problem, then you really do need to delay the issuance of the flood rewards and figure out a way to do that that actually encourages people to stay in the long term. And it makes it such that they don't just leave whenever that ends, right? So all of this is to just say, like, what we're talking about is a very complicated issue, and it's not. It's like just delaying mints isn't necessarily going to solve the problem. Just implementing a flood in any case where you feel like the system is growing isn't necessarily going to solve the problem. Like, I would argue that the problem is more that the system hasn't been able to get people to speculate again, if you will. So from that perspective, the system doesn't have enough speculative demand at its current stage. So it's a very tricky problem, is what I would say.
Well, as you know, someone who was around at the beginning of the launch, well, looking back, you know, when the system first launched, like, everyone knew it was going to grow, right? So to some degree, it was going to grow. So everyone was trying to get in early, and then even when the system was flooding, people were just waiting for the system to stop flooding so that they could buy in, hoping that it would flood again. So this is a cold start problem, right? Like, that's only going to happen the first time, because the second time, people are going to actually have different amounts of grown stock, whereas on first launch, no one had any grown stock. So everyone was just like speculating to the max on this thing. But if there had been fewer prints, and look, I love prints, but if there had been fewer of them, then like the insane, like, I remember going to bed and waking up and like there was just an insane amount of prints in flood that had happened. And if we'd still printed, but just to a smaller degree, then it wouldn't have been so ridiculous, and there's a much lower chance that we would have overprinted, because now, you know, we've got an extra 4 million Pinto or something, with like a couple 100K of liquidity. And so the key problem was the over minting. And if you just don't mint so much so fast, then the people that were in it to speculate, if they would have left earlier because the mints were not so ridiculous, or if they might not have joined in the first place because the mints were so ridiculous, then you would have had less minting overall, and you would have had a potentially, more dampened uprun, which I think it should be the goal, because whenever this thing starts printing, like, it just prints like crazy. The APYs shoot up so high, it becomes so attractive that people are like, you know, going out to borrow money in order to put more into this thing, because like in a couple days it will have increased by some ridiculous amount, right? So just slowing down the printing, I think, is something that we should really look into, whether that is a mini flood and swapping part of the rewards, or just printing like a fraction of the rewards that should be minted, something like that. I think in the end, it would end up with less minted overall, therefore less overhang, therefore more likely to get back to peg longer term. Therefore, the cycles are likely to, not have like a super compressed up cycle with like a really long drawn out bear cycle, but to be more longer term.
Yeah, I think that is something we can all agree on, which is that we should spend time trying to figure out how to minimize overminting during a flood cycle. But that's a bit different than in a normal healthy minting cycle, which we haven't seen during Pinto. So it's a little bit hard to feel like we have the data to really change how the system functions during normal mints when we haven't seen that yet.
Agreed. Yeah, it might be totally different next time, because the long-term holders will have most of the stock. The new people that join will have, minimal stock. However, that is reduced a little bit with S Pinto. People can just hop in S Pinto, leave through S Pinto. All the stock basically stays there. And so that is kind of a shortcut to the stock system. Although I do think S Pinto has like a limit on how much it can be as a percentage of the whole system. So maybe that also is enough to fix that problem. But yeah, I guess we won't really know until we get to that next cycle. So the bigger problem is, how do we actually get to that next cycle?
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. All right, well, we are running into the top of the hour. Feels like we could do this forever. I hope that we get to do this forever, at least until we figure out how to make this thing actually work. And so thank you everyone for coming. Looking forward to resuming this next week on X. Thank you very much, Ford, for coming and for your discussion. I truly appreciate it. It makes this much more interesting and enjoyable, I think, than just hearing me talk. So thank you. And we'll see everyone hopefully next week.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Hey, guys.
Bye.